So, I grew up on Long Island, New York. As a young child, there was a TV show called Andy's Gang. The theme song was, I got a gang, you got a gang, everybody's gotta have a gang, but there's only one real gang for me, good old Andy's Gang. And they featured Rama of the Jungle, adaptations of Rudyard Kipling. And the boy Rama had just a gumsha, he had a turban, no shoes. He hung out in all these temples in Bengal. And when he would go to the temple, he would hear them chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. And that was my first exposure to Krishna consciousness. Now, when I was in high school, probably 10th grade, I guess 10th grade, a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, I had gone to Catholic school, so I grew up as a Catholic. So a good friend of mine, Peter Campanella, was in New York City. He came across a store called Matchless Gifts. He bought a copy of an album where Prabhupada chanted Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. He brought this album home and called us all up and said, you guys are not going to believe what I found. He said, what? He said, I got a transmission here from a spaceman. This guy is from outer space. He's brought a message. I don't know if anybody's deciphered it yet, but he brought a message, and if you listen to him chant, you will go into ecstasy and do the dance of ecstasy. So we were all little wise guys, we little punks. But we thought, how are we going to pass up listening to a spaceman? So we all got together and we were smoking some hashish, Campanella's house. And he had bongo drums and cymbals, and we started chanting. And by the time the chanting over, we were in ecstasy. And so I still have the Hare Krishna album. And so these guys had a store in Laguna called the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. And they had a juice bar and a bookstore and a place you could sell clothes. And in the back they had a meditation room. And another guy was working there, his name was Nanda Kumar. He and I became good friends. We go in there one day, and here they are in the back room chanting Hare Krishna. I had no idea anybody even knew about chanting Hare Krishna but us. But we went back in, and Dinanath was there, Tamal Krishna was there. Several other devotees were there. They told us all about the temple and that we had to go. So we decided we'd hitch up to LA and see what the temple was about. And Prabhupada was just arriving, and everybody was just in a tussle getting ready for Prabhupada to come. I was still a hippie. I had long hair and a beard. But the devotee said I could go down to the flower market, and I could get some flowers and I could make a garland for Prabhupada. And so when Prabhupada came, I made a garland, and he got off the airplane and walked out to the car, and I bowed down and I put the flowers around Srila Prabhupada's neck and bent down and touched his feet. And he looked down at me and he said, and so, when will you be joining? I really didn't have an intention to join then, but I knew the way he looked into my eyes that I would be joining soon. And I went back to Laguna. I had many devotee friends who were there. Krishalya was a god sister, and she was there. And Krishalya she was to me was one of the most mystic girls I've ever met in my life. She was so spiritually minded and knew everything about Bhagavad Gita. She could preach so nicely. So the whole time I was living in Laguna, I was going down to San Diego to the Self-Realization Fellowship. And all the people that lived there, although they all seemed nice and sincere, they had hairdos like my mother did, you know, coming home from the beauty parlor, you know. And they just did not have the vibration to attract me to a yoga lifestyle. Whereas when I came to the temple, all the devotees were full of life. And you could tell that there was something happening in them. They were exuberant with devotional sentiment, almost intoxicating to be around them. And you just wanted to know what it was that they could have plugged into that could have transformed their life and made them feel so blissful. And while there wasn't anything lacking on a mundane level in my life, there was something lacking deep in my heart. And I didn't feel complete, and I felt the yearning. And that is what made the difference between other things that I might have been looking at versus my encounter with the devotees.
Good.
And so then I went up to San Francisco, made the transaction, met with Bob Rubahan, went down to the temple, and went up to attend Arti. Hansaduta was doing kirtan, and Hansaduta was just an ecstatic kirtan leader. And I fell in love with Hansadut immediately. I accepted him as my elder god brother. And he had had a lot of association with Prabhupada and could just tell the most nectarine stories about Prabhupada. And so I shaved my head that day and I joined the temple. So that was how I became a devotee. What happened was that George Harrison had given the manor to the London devotees. And there was a shuffling around of personnel, and Prabhupada wanted Kansadut and Himavati to go to San Francisco. But the Berkeley Temple was so new, there were no initiated devotees in the Berkeley Temple. So Prabhupada said, is there anyone suitable? And Hansadutta said, yes, there's this one boy, Bhaktabil, he would be okay. And so Prabhupada said, all right, send him down and get him initiated. And so I flew down with a couple of, I think, 4 other devotees. My wife, I believe Lochan and Hardayananda, and we all got initiated. And at the initiation, Prabhupada explained that my devotee name was Bahulasva. And he described that Bahulasva was a king, and he was a great devotee of Krishna. And he was renowned for having many horses. And he said, you have always had many horses, and always will have many horses. And therefore, I give you this name, Many Horses. And I grew up, my family raised and trained horses. And all through my adult life, I've had horses. And even now, as I'm approaching the end of my life, I still have one horse. That showed me that Prabhupada was no ordinary person in my life, and that there were numerous instances when Prabhupada read my mind, where I would go in to see Srila Prabhupada, and I've been fretting about something or been in anxiety, and Prabhupada said, so, Bahulasva, you've been thinking this? And he would know exactly what I had been thinking. And then I would say, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And then he said, have you worked out the solution? And I would say, no, Srila Prabhupada. And then he would say, then I recommend you do this. Well, what can you say, right? Who can do that to you, you know? And so then what shortly happened, and this was a giant boon for me. This was a boon. And I do not want to present this in a way to glorify myself. Because it was all Prabhupada's grace. And I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. So I had no college education. I did not even think of myself as an intellectual person. And here I was a temple president of Berkeley Temple. And for some reason, one day, this gentleman came to the temple on Durant, and he was Dr. Stilson Judah. And he was the head of the Berkeley Theological Seminary. And he told me he wanted to compile a book about Krishna consciousness, and specifically what makes a person become a devotee. And so I told him I'd ask Prabhupada if I could get permission. And Prabhupada said, yes, give him permission. And so this began a 2-year project where we put together questionnaires about background, what were your thoughts like before, and so on and so forth. And we submitted it to Srila Prabhupada, and he was very pleased with it. And Dr. Judah went ahead and published this book. And he derived great notoriety for doing this book. It was the first of its kind. And he derived great notoriety and became very intimate with Srila Prabhupada. And because of my contact, like a liaison between him, every time Prabhupada wanted to see Dr. Judah, he would invite me down.
On one of these walks with Dr. Judah, Srila Prabhupada was explaining that the way to become Krishna conscious is through the practice of devotional service, of sadhana. And that if you don't practice getting up in the morning, going to arti, chanting, shravanam, kirtanam, all the various ways to practice devotional service, then there's no question of you becoming Krishna conscious. You can't become Krishna conscious without engaging in the activities of devotional service. And so I made some kind of comment, some kind of foolish comment came out of my mouth about the importance of this or that. And Srila Prabhupada turned around and told me that he had been explaining this to me for 100 lifetimes. And all the devotees went, oh, as if that was a compliment, that Prabhupada had to come back 100 times to save me from ignorance. But Prabhupada actually meant, at least I took it in a way, that this is how foolish you are, that after 100 lifetimes you're still not getting the message that Krishna consciousness has to be practiced.
Can you say like that, any statistics that nobody has? Maybe we have not seen him or has seen God. That is quite possible because we have not scrutinizingly studied all the men of the world.
Yes.
Then how you can say nobody has seen? You have not seen the man who has seen him.
So the man
He will not admit his fault. He will accuse others. Nobody has seen God. Why? You may not have seen, but why you say nobody has seen? You have not seen that person who has seen God. Therefore you say like that.
So those people who wrote the Bible did not see God.
That is, when God is canvassing, here I am, Krishna, they will not see it. And still they accuse nobody has seen.
Now there's a few quick incidences, but before I would jump to them, I would note that my dearest godbrother and friend, who passed away just a few years ago, Dharma Jaksha, had joined the movement. And where I may have excelled in organizational skills, Dharma excelled in academic skills. And Dharma was able to take the entire university curriculum and decipher it so that we could have a class not just in religious studies, but a class in archaeology, in Hindu sociology. And so where I was where I had a robust college program, lecturing once or twice a week. Dharma, with his brilliance, turned that into, you'd go to the university, you'd do 3 or 4 lectures at a time. And so it became a giant program. We made lots of devotees came and joined on the basis of that. And so the next professor I got to meet was Dr. Theodore Rozak. And he was I would say, a bigger intellectual than Dr. Judah was. And he wanted to write a book, The Making of the Counterculture. And so Dr. Judah introduced him to me, and I flew down to LA and introduced him to Prabhupada. And somehow or other, I became the liaison person between the professors and Prabhupada. Okay, so Dr. Rozak and Dr. Judah had different slants, okay? Dr. Rozak was the intellectual, and Dr. Judah was more like an administrator. And so those conversations took different twists. And Dr. Rozak, even though he would be sometimes challenging to Prabhupada's view, he was always, always highly respectful of Prabhupada's view. And Prabhupada had different themes that he would discuss with these professors. And one of the themes that he discussed was life comes from life. And so this topic, life comes from life, this topic Dr. Rozak latched onto, okay? And he saw in this a topic that he could actually make a mark in, okay? And he wrote a book called The Voice of the Earth. Now the premise of this book is very deep, and I won't go into it in its full scope, but I've read it 12 times myself. So the idea is this: how did the universe come into being? So let's not approach this with any kind of bias, okay? Let's say that neither of us know how the universe came into being, right? Well, we have all this data, and we're going to try to compile this data and see if we can indeed make some sense out of it. So yes, so this is it here. So, you can see how many times I read it. The cover is coming off. And so the very first notion that some whack-ball scientist put forth was that randomness could describe the evolution of life. And the idea, the kind of joke, if you would, that they put together was, if you put together 1 million monkeys in a room and they all typed away. Eventually they would produce DNA. That was their idea. And so the premise on this is if you had an infinite period of time. And because when this was proposed, nobody knew how old the universe was. So you couldn't really debate it, because given an infinite amount of time, anything's possible, right? Certainly, I mean, an infinite amount of time is just, you can't even get your head around what an infinite amount of time is. But then, as that theory evolved, and the gentleman who calculated this is in this book, it became apparent there wasn't an infinite amount of time. The universe had a lifespan, 13.5 billion years. Sounds like a lot of time, right? But it pales in comparison to infinite. And so he's shown that there is not adequate time for the monkeys to generate DNA in a type room typing randomly. So he and Srila Prabhupada put that forth and said to Srila Prabhupada, what do you think of this idea now in light of the 13.5 billion years? And I think this was on a morning walk. And Prabhupada said, obviously, that 13 billion and infinite are not the same, and therefore it would be impossible that such a thing could come about. And then Rozak bit into that, and that got published in this book, and that became one of his major lecturing points. One thing that stands out to me on a very intimate note are Rath Yatras. And, San Francisco Temple is New Jagannath Puri. That's what Prabhupada called it from the beginning. All the devotees who have served there for any length of time worship Jagannath in that spirit. And I love Jagannath Temple like I love Jagannath Puri. And Srila Prabhupada was coming up to do what was called mantra rock. Now, there really wasn't a big temple there yet, but Allen Ginsberg, who wrote the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, was convinced he could organize a big kirtan. And so, at his own initiative, Allen organized Mantra Rock. And all the famous rock bands of the day played. Janis Joplin played. You just name it, they were there. And it was a giant success. It really gave the feeling that ISKCON was just going to now explode, and the Bay Area was going to be its holding point, and Country Joe and the Fish were there. And this was a great event, and it was held as a family dog. And the next year we had another festival there. I didn't attend the Mantra Rock Festival. I was still a hippie in Laguna. but I attended the second one. And Narayan had built the carts, and we pulled them through Golden Gate Park, and Prabhupada danced. And when Prabhupada danced, it was like the whole universe danced. Everyone went into pure ecstasy. It was just magnificent. And when it was over, Madhavisa had rented a vehicle, some kind of a limo, to pick Srila Prabhupada up and take Srila Prabhupada back to the apartment that we had rented for him. And when we got to the car, I was standing behind Madhu. Srila Prabhupada was sitting on the passenger side with his legs on the ground. And Madhavisa was kneeling like this. And he said, "Did you like it, Srila Prabhupada?" And Srila Prabhupada grabbed Madhavisa by the head, rubbed his hands on his head and kissed him, and said, "I loved it, Madhavisa." And that was just another endearing moment where I realized who the Guru was, who the real Jagat Guru was. The aspect that I had not seen before was the intimacy, was the loving sentiment that the Guru has for the disciple. It was not simply some mechanical thing where you came and, like at a church, made a donation and went away. But there was a deep bond of love between the Guru and the disciple. And then all you had to do was engage in devotional service, and you could experience that directly for yourself.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And so then we decided we were going to do a Lord Chaitanya festival. And Lochan Das was a great artist. He had been in the Berkeley Temple. He had joined before I did. He created the murtis of Lord Chaitanya. And they were life-size, and we paraded them down the street, and they moved, and their arms moved. And we then culminated that at People's Park. And Prabhupada was very pleased with that event, and encouraged us to continue doing more festivals. And then Issue Upanishad came out. Up until then, we had been just distributing back to Godhead. But then Issue Upanishad came out. And so Hari and I, Dayananda and I, we went out in the evenings, just the two of us, and distributed Issue Upanishad. And that was very nice. Prabhupada was very pleased with that. And then there was a practice where different devotees would have the opportunity to be Prabhupada's servant for some period of time. And so usually if Prabhupada would be traveling, he might be stopping at, some temple, and you'd have an opportunity where there'd be a window of time. You'd have an opportunity to go and to be Prabhupada's servant. And so Prabhupada was coming to New Vrindavan, And there was a couple of weeks where no one was designated to be his servant. And so I was offered the opportunity to do that. And so I was delighted, and I took it immediately. And I bathed Prabhupada and would massage him with mustard oil and rub sandalwood paste on his head and sit next to him and fan him and stuff. It was very hot in New Vrindavan. And one night, I was getting Prabhupada's bed ready, and I had laid out all his sleeping paraphernalia. And Prabhupada was looking out the window, and he had a giant Tulsi feather, Tulsi peacock feather, that had fallen from, you know, from one of his wrists. And he bent down and picked it up, and he began holding it over his face, and he was just chanting, Govinda, 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 Govinda. And Prabhupada just became so overwhelmed with ecstasy. And I was just bewildered. I just didn't know what to think or what to say or anything like that. It was so touching and so intimate. I was actually embarrassed. It was as if I had walked in on something very intimate and should not have been even gazing at it. And then I picked up a few other artifacts that had fallen and straightened up Srila Prabhupada's room. And when he was finished, then I offered my humblest obeisances and walked away. And there were many instances where Prabhupada showed that his knowledge of Krishna was not simply coming out of books, but his knowledge of Krishna was based on the fact that he knew Krishna, and that when he invoked Krishna, there was no doubt that he invoked Krishna. And then we were in the process then of getting a temple in Chicago. And I had saved up Lakshmi to buy the building. It was very hard doing Sankirtan in Chicago because it was the meat-eating capital of the world. It was very demonic. And the winters were horrible. And the Lakshmi was thin and lean.
Slow and coming.
Yes, when I first got there, we had no water. Purnamai was pregnant. We went through the whole winter with no water, no hot water. Then a blessing from heaven came. Parvajakacharya and Paramahansa, two brahmacharis from Colorado, arrived out of the blue. And they were such great souls. They were so much fun, so enthusiastic, never got tired. And they just revitalized my meager efforts. And we finally raised the money. And I had gone to New Vrindavan to tell Prabhupada, you know, that we raised the funds. And Swarup had gone there before me. He was GBC. And he insisted on another building that was a YMCA building. And so he was there for 3 or 4 days telling Prabhupada how great that building was. But in my mind, it was nothing but a headache. Well, when I got there, it was too late. Prabhupada was convinced we were going to get that building. He was all enthusiastic. Oh, Bahulasva, so you found a building so big. And what was I going to say, right?
This is the one in Evanston?
In Evanston, yes. So we got that building, but I was always looking for an opportunity to get out of there as quickly as I could. And then finally Chitsukananda had gone to Mexico City, and Prabhupada said he needed help, and we were friends. And so Chitsu kindly invited me there. And then Prabhupada came to Mexico City. Oh my God, you could not have believed that, man. It was the Pope coming to Mexico City. The Mexican people are so devoted, you know. It just blossoms from their heart. And their reception to Srila Prabhupada was just amazing, just amazing. And many, many mayors of towns and you know, countyships and stuff, right, wanted Prabhupada to come and speak. You know, the Q&As were not really philosophically profound as much as they were love of God directed. I think that's what stood out mostly. There weren't doubters, you know. There weren't, oh, why do you know? There wasn't any of that. There was, they saw Prabhupada, you know. They saw who he was. They knew who he was. And it was just more take shelter at Prabhupada's lotus feet and you know, that kind of just loving devotion. Well, the most attractive quality, the most undeniable quality is unalloyed devotion. This I have never seen in another human being, okay? Never seen anything like it. Real love of God. And there, you know, there have been, due to my false ego, you know, there have been little tweaks and things here where I might have got puffed up and had some ego difference, you know, between how this could be or that could be philosophically. They don't amount to anything. They don't even come close to the devotional sentiment that you encounter when you see Srila Prabhupada and when you render service to Srila Prabhupada. I want to offer my humblest obeisances to my God brothers and God sisters who I've had the good fortune to know and to serve Srila Prabhupada in this life. Thank you all Prabhus and Prabhujis. All glories to Prabhupada, all glories to Lord Chaitanya. Haribol.
Jai Anilo Premadana Koruna Prachu Jai Anilo